You might be like me and somebody who struggles with nailing their taper. Well, it's not all about the physical side of tapering. It's also about the mental side. And Faye Stenning has that down. Let's listen to this part of the interview and understand how she is able to nail her taper. Kind of self-explanatory, heavy weights, heavy lifting, but activation, like, could you give us a audio visual of what that might look like?
Yeah, so basically the sort of overall theme in running injury free is you really need your glutes to be working, and people talk about their glutes all the time, and I think mostly like the glute med is one that really sometimes just does not turn on. So the whole point of activation exercises are to isolate that muscle and kind of get it working, so that the idea is if you are doing this before you go out for a run, it's like you're waking your glutes up, and then when you then go for a run or then go do your lift, they're already turned on, that they're awake, they're turned on, and they'll actually be able to do the what you're asking it to do by using those muscles, instead of relying off the other muscles, hamstrings, quads, calves, to do the work. And those muscles aren't designed to do that amount of like work, basically. Your glute is the biggest muscle, it's the most powerful muscle, so it makes sense that you just give all the work to it, let it do that, and your other muscles should be supporting it. But most people have it the other way, or a lot of people have it the other way around. That's why you hear people say, oh, they're quad dominant. What they're really saying is they don't know how to turn on their glutes. Because no one is naturally going to be quad dominant. Naturally we're designed to use the most powerful, parts of our body to propel us forward. That just makes no sense.
So activation before you lift or before you run, how do you turn on the glute? What's an exercise to do that?
I like it, and this is like where you really need to play around, and like I would encourage everyone's gonna go to a strength coach or go to a PT, chiro, like whatever, and get glute activation exercises. And there's so many different ones. But some of them aren't going to work for people just because of the way maybe your hips are, or the way your body's positioned, or just the way everyone's just different. So I think like go through all those exercises, find out which ones you feel a burn in your glute, and just focus on those ones, because those ones are working best for you. So for me, the one that I get like a really good quick burn and it turns on my glutes like really rapidly is just lateral band walks. So with like a mini band around my knees and around my ankles. Those work really well. Clamshells, like people always do clamshells. I cannot find my glute in a clamshell, so I don't do that exercise. So it's all kind of very individual.
So you're trying to isolate the muscle and really get a little burn in it, just so you're like, okay, it's awake.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool. So I know in preparation for this interview, I listened to many of your other interviews, and you had mentioned in one briefly that you used to be a runner that didn't stretch, didn't do any mobility, until one day you started a mobility kind of program and you noticed a big difference. Do you remember when that was and how that kind of came about?
Yeah. It's like, I feel like I haven't been doing that much mobility my whole career, because I haven't really seen my lack of not doing mobility really impede my ability to train or my ability to race well. But I had one race where it was like that 8-foot box, and I pulled myself up, but I couldn't get my leg over because my hip was so tight that I didn't have the fluidity or the range of motion, or my hips were just so locked up that I couldn't swing my leg over, and I actually failed that obstacle. That, along with getting no rep at high rocks for not being able to get to 90 degrees with wall balls, those were two instances I was like, oh my God, okay, it's obvious that my lack of mobility is really messing up with my training or with my races. And to be honest, I've put in mobility for the last couple years of my training, but it's been really, really inconsistent. though I've been doing it very consistently now just because the world is shut down and I have a bit more time. But it's always the first thing to go. And I feel really guilty about saying this, but it is. And I do find that now that I have a bit more time, I have been doing yoga twice a week. And I would never have time to do yoga twice a week, like add that onto my training and onto my business and onto my social life. It's just like, no, it's not going to work. But now that, things are slower, I do feel way, way better. The one thing I've really noticed is when I get up in the morning, my feet don't hurt. My feet used to hurt so much. And I think it's just because
like your arches or
just the bottoms. They would just like my whole foot would be so sore. And I think just from doing a bit of mobility, I've just sort of loosened up like everything in my body. And somehow that sort of trickled its way down to like having healthier, like less sore feet. So yeah, it does make a difference. I mean, I haven't raced with like, I feel really healthy and mobile right now. And I haven't really had a chance to race with this like new body of mine, but a day, like daily activities of living, like I feel a huge difference. Like I used to have like such sore shoulders that if I was like, driving a car and like reach back to the back seat, like I'd have to be like, can you pass me this? Like I couldn't even rotate my arm and my thoracic spine was so locked up. So I just feel more comfortable in general, but I mean, it's definitely got to translate to better performances racing too. But
sure. Yeah. And I'm not blaming you for mobility being the first to go, because it's always the first to go for me too. Because it's like, it's that extra like 5%, right? Your 95% is your strength and your running. And then anything else you get in is like the icing on top. And when you're stuck in between meetings or, you have a busy life and mobility is like, I got 10 minutes of this. No, thank you.
I know, totally. Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about like tapering, your approach to a big race. And I know like with the Spartan series, you have multiple races throughout the year that are, relatively a big deal. So like, how do you go about structuring some time to freshen up and feel good for those big races?
Yeah, I love tapering so much just because I can like actually have time to like wake up and have a cup of coffee and not be so rushed. Like, I don't know, people say they don't like tapering. I'm like, I love tapering. Like, there's a lot of things I actually like to do other than working out that like I get a chance to do when I'm tapering. So yeah, we did a podcast on tapering actually yesterday, and
oh, nice.
I was saying to Jess, I was like, I make a taper list, and she's like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, like a taper to-do list, like all the stuff that I wanted to do that I never have time to do in regular life. I get to do that my week of tapering. So I think for me, like tapering, like obviously it's going to make your legs feel fresher. But for me, it's more of just like a mental, it basically, I think that like, I think running is so hard, like mentally, I mean, it hurts so much. And like, I think people don't understand that like us pros, like we're in just as much pain as you. Like, it's not like running gets easier. You just get faster and then it still hurts. You just run at a faster speed, or you run faster and then you have to run faster and longer. And then it really starts to hurt even more. So it's very painful and you're constantly pushing yourself every day, whether that's in a long run or whether that's trying to hit pace and intervals. And that takes like a lot of like mental grit and toughness. And if you don't, like, the taper for me is like, I get a week or 10 days to like not feel that intense pain. And so then I hold on to that and I start to crave it because I've been without it. And then I kind of unleash it on race day. So I find the more I taper, the tougher I am on race day, because it's not just like, oh, okay, we're going to the well again. Okay, we're putting ourselves in pain again. It's like, oh my God, I haven't been uncomfortable for 10 days. Like, I'm kind of craving a little discomfort. So for me, it's more about saving up the ability to really, really push in a race.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I would argue that as you get more and more advanced in your athletic career, like the pain gets worse because you're able to navigate through the pain, whereas in the beginning you're like, oh, this hurts, I'm slowing down. And now you're like, well, this hurts, but everybody else just keep going, so I have to too. So
yeah, exactly. I know running hurts so much. It's so funny to me that I still do it. Like every time, like it probably happens once a week. I'm in the middle of like an interval and I'm like, I hate my life. Like right at this moment, like I hate my life.
Yeah.
And then like I get back to my apartment after like a cool down and I'm like, oh my God, that was so amazing. Like that interval, like I pushed through and that really powered up that hill. And then the cool down, I ran into so-and-so in the park and we had a chat and I just feel so happy because I'm so tired and maybe I should take a nap or get have breakfast. And you're just so annoying. And then, like,
I call that amnesia. Like you forgot how horrible it was because at the end you have all your endorphins and it was like, oh, that was the best thing ever. But in the middle of it, you're like, this is the worst thing ever.
I know. It's so funny.
Well, there you have it. If you'd like to hear the rest of the interview with Faye Stenning, you can go to Science of Sports Recovery on whatever podcast app that you have. The full audio version is there. Otherwise, you can subscribe and ring the bell here on YouTube, and we're coming out with more great content every week with top-level athletes and researchers for you